Hi everyone, this is Mayank Pokharna from Everything Coliving. We are back with another co-living conversation with Robert from Toboggan Flats. Toboggan Flats is a Canadian co-living company which focuses on office to co-living conversions. Today, let's deep dive a little bit into the Canadian ecosystem. Robert, who has been working on this for the last 1.5, 2 years. Let's learn from him what the trends are in the Canadian ecosystem, how the housing situation is evolving, and why office to co-living conversions makes a lot of sense. And then let's also deep dive into a case study that he has to share with us to kind of understand it better. And if any one of you have any interest in this, you can always reach out to Robert. I will leave his details in the description below. Thanks a lot and welcome, Robert.
Yeah, great to be here, Mike. It's been fun. It feels like 17 years, not 2 years, but it's been great. And you've been along for a lot of this ride, so you've really helped us out. So great to be here.
Perfect. So, Robert, let's start in understanding kind of last 10 years of journey of housing in the Canadian ecosystem. What has been the macro trends, how things have evolved. You have seen this up and close. So if you can take us through a little bit of that understanding, I think that'll be better for everybody to understand the Canadian market.
Yeah, the Canadian market is similar to many markets, developed markets around the world, where we have a shortage of housing supply, and that's been creeping up on us for many, many years. And I think post-COVID, we really started to see the acceleration of the challenge in the country. We have, I would say, in comparison to other countries that we've been looking at Toboggan Flats, I'd say we have an inflexible housing stock, which means that we've got a lot of condominium buildings for people to own. We have purpose-built rental, but it's a narrower categorization of each of the different types of housing. You know, obviously lots of full family homes. One thing we have in Canada is beautiful nature and lots of land. And I think we've taken advantage of that land for a long time by spreading everything out, trying to build bigger houses further from the downtowns. One of the other characteristics that we've seen in Canada is that we've really left that younger generation behind. Success of the country is really driven by the success of its cities. And the success of cities is often driven by the ability for the downtowns to be vibrant places. And that vibrancy comes from having younger generations live in those downtown cores. And that's really where the challenge has been, I guess, accelerated over the last 5 or 10 years, is that Canada has not been able to create a housing stock that's affordable enough for young professionals, young workers to live once they've graduated from post-secondary education. So that's the challenge that we set out to fill, was how do we build great housing for young professionals downtown that's also affordable. And when I say affordable, the definition we use for affordability is 30% of income should go towards housing or less. And that has been, when we've done research across the country, a lot of young people are spending 50% or more of their income on housing, or they're just staying home with their families much, much longer than ever before. So that's the challenge, is how do you create a housing stock that is more flexible, more adaptable, more affordable, so that we can regenerate those cities that were hit so hard during COVID, regenerate those cities by bringing more young people downtown.
Interesting. So I picked up kind of 3 keywords from what you just said, like flexible, affordable, central to the city, and stock for youth, right? Now, the exposure that I have had in the different markets in Europe, in Middle East, in Asia, one thing that keeps coming back in those markets, and I would love to know if that's the case in Canada as well, is that the renting is becoming a default option until the age of, let's say, 35 to 40, and people are buying after that, which is also increasing the demand of the kind of stock you would need to serve people until the age of like 35 to 40. from a rental perspective. Is that something that you've also
Yeah.
seen in the Canadian ecosystem?
Same in Canada. I think everyone's a little more surprised at that because even young people, their aspiration is to own a home, not rent a home. So the model has been much more around ownership. The focus of developers has been around ownership and purpose-built rental. While there is lots of purpose-built rental in Canada, it doesn't seem to be the goal of a lot of young people. But the average age just gets older and older and older for a first-time home buyer because that generation just doesn't have, the younger generation just doesn't have the savings. So what we need to do is find ways to allow that younger generation to accumulate savings so that if they choose to buy a home, they have that option.
All right. Interesting. So, moving on in that conversation, one thing that I would like to understand a bit more, why do you think the time is right from a co-living perspective in the Canadian ecosystem? Like, what are the signals that you're getting which are kind of pushing you to the direction of thinking that, hey, now is the time of co-living?
Well, first and foremost, rental is where we need to go. So we need to build more rental housing in Canada. I think secondly, we need to find a way to build more affordable rental housing in Canada. And thirdly, we have a huge loneliness crisis in Canada. And the loneliest subgroup of the population is young people, which surprises a lot of people when I talk about that. So we need to create more affordable rental housing. We need to solve loneliness. And if I add a third one in, we still have a responsibility to take action on climate. And so anything that's positive towards climate would be a third component. So put all those together and you end up with co-living. And the other piece, people talk about when we talk in Canada, there isn't really a co-living industry in Canada, which when I got into this, I was sort of shocked that it wasn't here, that it was doing well in Asia and the United States and Europe and in the Middle East and Australia. Like it's just, there's a groundswell of momentum now in co-living, but in Canada, it just hadn't shown up yet. So the advantage is we get to learn from everybody else in the world and turn all those mistakes into positives and take advantage of all the successes. So that's the opportunity. But right now, as a segment of purpose-built rental, it hasn't evolved as quickly as I would have expected.
Interesting. You touched upon loneliness. Like there was a recent report by Coho, which is the property management software company out of UK. They did a research across 3,000 personnels, and they found that 1 in 5 people consider themselves very, very lonely, which is a very interesting thing because it's across ages, right? Like, and people are like, if 20% of people are saying that we are absolutely feeling lonely, there is something systemic wrong. And other than offices, the most amount of time you spend is in homes, right? And if you don't, if the homes are not built around solving this problem, then we are staring at a future, I think, which is very, very, I don't think I would have a good thing to say about that future. So I think that's another thing to look from a perspective that why we need co-living, why we need more community housing. And another thing that I have seen across different markets is as families are becoming more nuclear, marriage age is getting pushed towards 30s, mid 30s now. The ownership that was earlier in mid 30s is moving to early 40s. All these macro trends are contributing to a place where the need of the rental housing stock is at all-time high. And if we don't change our ways and keep developing what we have been developing, we will not serve the new demand that has come up in the market. And I think with Canadian ecosystem, that's where it stands. And I think with the things that I have seen you doing, and I've seen a lot of from a design perspective, from how you want to build something, I think that's something that will increasingly have high demand as we go forward, and solves a lot of these macro issues which are coming from around the world. And we see that in the Canadian ecosystem also. Now, with that, I would love for you to kind of take us through the kind of case study that you have for us. We would love to see what you have in terms of office to co-living conversions, and I also
Yeah,
think it'll be a great learning opportunity for all our listeners in order to understand the nitty-gritties of what goes into doing something like this. And uh, yeah, anything else that you would like to share? Over to you.
great. Well, I think we talked about loneliness. So what we want to do is create good quality rental housing. And for us, that means you want to build a community. Two, we want to make sure we're going to build something that's affordable and affordable at that 30% of your income mark. And we know what that is through all the data that we can collect in all the cities that we're looking at across Canada. Third, we talked about the real need. We need housing now. We don't need housing in 7 years. We actually let me change that. We need housing in 7 years too, but we need housing now. So when we started looking at what's the opportunity, we saw a huge vacancy of office buildings across Canada. In the B and C class, the not so good office buildings, that's about 25% of that space is unoccupied right now. So big vacancies. That hasn't changed since COVID. Even though some people are going back to the office, they go back to the nicer offices, not the less nice offices. So that created this opportunity to say, could you take empty space and turn it into housing? Specifically, is there a way to convert an office building much faster and cheaper through a co-living model than through a traditional rental apartment or condominium model, which is traditionally where conversions happen? And the answer is absolutely. And we've tested out almost 100 buildings across Canada in 12 cities. And I'll show you an example of one in a second, but we've partnered with some of the best minds and technology minds around to put together this assessment model, checked with legal and planning and everyone else to see, okay, how do we convert faster, which will end up meaning we can convert these buildings to co-living more cost effectively, which means we can offer affordable rents. That's the sequence that we looked at. So let me share my screen and I'll sort of talk to you as I'm doing it. So this particular building that I'm going to share, and let's make sure I can share it quickly here. Okay, and you can see that, Mayank?
Yeah.
Awesome. So Ottawa is the capital of Canada. It's the fourth largest city in Canada. It's more than 1 million people in that metropolitan area. It has a second largest student population in the downtown or in the city in Canada. So there's a lot of students who are graduating. And right now, there is not very much rental housing for those people who are graduating, young workers. This particular building that I'm going to show you is in what's called the Byward Market, which is an old traditional market in Ottawa. It sits 10-minute walk from the Parliament buildings in Canada. It's a 10-minute walk from a major hospital, and it's a 5-minute walk from the University of Ottawa. So it's got this perfect location. And this is an office building. And if you sort of squint a little bit and what you see is those white blocks around the edges, if those were desks, you might say this looks like an accountant's office or a law office or just an office. And that's because it's an office building. But the great thing about this, and heads up to our partners, Archeologics, who did the programming and does this, allows us to assess buildings in 24 hours to see whether they're viable for co-living. But I'll just flip this on the side. This building already exists. It's got windows. It's you can see the structure of the building, and as we have a look at it, we can actually go a little bit more closely into the building and see that our model for co-living has three distinct kind of units, and I'll explain how that works.
I have a
And
question
jump in
before
if you,
we.
yeah, I could
Yeah.
feel you had a question. Yeah, jump in.
Okay. So you're saying that you're picking up an office building. You just explained where it is in Ottawa, right? And the accessibility is great.
Yeah,
Now, you are not changing the final walls of the building. You are saying that the infrastructure will remain the same, the
that's
outside
right.
walls will remain the same. We will go inside and kind of reorient and restructure the inside to serve the co-living purpose. Because we
Correct.
don't have to do outside, the cost to construction and the speed and the time to construction will be much lesser, and we can get this
Yep.
stock much faster. Like that's the hypothesis that we're working with.
100%. And we're looking at construction times of this building around 9 months from permit.
Oh,
So,
okay.
these elevators are the existing elevators. We're keeping those.
Okay.
We're keeping the existing HVAC system, and we're just going to make sure that it works. It worked for the office building. We believe it's going to work for this building as well. The three unit types we have is a 4-bedroom share,
Hmm.
4-bedroom, 2-bath. It's a 4-bedroom apartment. So it's a rental
Got it.
apartment for four people. This one allows, just like co-living is so good at, it allows each of these individuals to have their own
Space.
agreement with us, their own space. These spaces are 210 square feet. So that's about 21 square meters that's the bedroom. So it's a much, much larger than a typical student accommodation bedroom would be. And there's still space in this for this 4-share model, and it's got a kitchenette in it. The And then the other unit we have is over here on the corner, and I'll just move over to show you a little bit more how that works. And this one is a studio apartment, about 300 square feet, 30 square meters, and it has its own. It has a bathroom, and it has a kitchenette in it. So it's just a studio apartment. And then the third type of unit is a we call it ensuite, which just has the bathroom but no kitchenette. They would share with these two these two bedrooms here. There'd be a kitchenette in here. So the three different types allows us to, almost like a puzzle piece, is to fit the building most efficiently to make sure that we can use the space that we've got. The other thing I'm excited about is, the purple in here is all common space. And this you wouldn't find in a traditional, other types of purpose-built rental, is the amount of common space that we can offer to the people living on this floor. There's 39 people living on the floor. And every story looks like this. So I'll just flip this up a little bit more. On this, we have almost a central meeting area for people from this entire floor. And then up here, we have a studio space. And I'll use feet, so we just converted it to meters, but it's 32 feet by 16 feet. So it's actually a very good size room that you might put a yoga studio in. You could put a media room in. You could put a games room in, laundry. And that's what we're going to do. We have a stacking plan so that each floor, which has accessibility through these elevators, has a unique way for this community to gather. We call it kind of small, medium, and large. So these are the small connection points, which are little booths that you can do work in, or you can just meet and have a coffee with your friends on the floor. This is like, we call your room your house. This is your street, and the building is your neighborhood. So on your street, you might meet up with your friends for a coffee in this small interaction area. Medium spaces like yoga studios or a games room or a cinema room would be in this space on every floor. And then on the main floor, we have a community kitchen, co-working space, cafe, and a full gym for the members. So this is
I have another
390
question.
people. Yeah, go for it, Mike.
I'm so sorry. I have another question. Like it looks very, very intriguing. What's the space utilization at a floor level? Like private versus public, like shared. What's the percentage in within a single floor? what's the
Yeah.
percentage of area that's private versus shared?
Yeah, and depends on your definition of private, but this area here, for example, is, that's 3,000 square feet of the I think the total floor plate is around 13,000. So it's, almost
25%.
20%, yeah, 25% of the floor is going to be shared space. Of course, so is the space inside these flats to some degree. And then you have an entire floor on the bottom, and we're also looking at a way to put a lounge area on the top floor. So there's going to be 20 to 25%. So in Canada, they call it amenity
So,
space, but it's really this common space.
so about 25% of common space on each floor. And then you will have a couple of floors where you have like a larger, let's say a gym or larger lounge area, which will
Yeah.
basically take the overall percentage higher to about, let's say 35-40%.
Yeah, maybe not 40%, but certainly in the high 20s when we look at the overall
Okay.
development. This would, and every building's going to be different, Mike. So some have less interior space and therefore they're more efficient. But then we're looking to put amenities on on full floors if we need to. But this model of having different types of interactions and connection points is very important to us.
There's also one thing which I'm observing here, right? Like, so there are smaller clusters within, let's say, a four-bedroom apartment which has their own common spaces where those
Yes,
four people can interact, like have interaction. But then there is
that's
a
right.
larger cluster which is like the yoga studio or the common area in between where you can have like much larger interactions, which also fits in something that I have seen in past that when you start building a much larger co-living ecosystem, as you said, this will probably be a 390 unit co-living space. You
Yeah.
by design, if it doesn't create micro clusters, it becomes very difficult in future to manage and build the community. But if you have micro clusters by design and then shared interaction by design, I think that adds a lot of value in mid to long term, which we don't realize at in the during the start.
Yeah, and you've got space to interact within your flat. If you have a four-bed share, you've got these little, right now they're just kind of booths areas like phone booth or sitting areas. This is just for the placement of it. But these are small interaction zones, the middle interaction zone, and then the larger community zones on that main floor. Uh, we've got in this particular development, there's a big grocery store across the street. There's a cinema 2 blocks away. It's right on the transit line. So there's just so much to love about the location. And right now, this is a vacant office building. So there's no one there.
Got it.
And to be able to bring 390 people into the core of a city with affordable rents and the idea of reducing loneliness, and as the building's there, so you're saving all that concrete that you'd pour to build a new building. So that's an opportunity to
No,
be positive impact on the environment as well.
no, it looks like a no-brainer, right? Like one is the different aspect of it that you can create, right? One, let's say you again, I can see so many possibilities that different floor goes to different generations, so it becomes an intergenerational space where
Yeah,
interactions across generation happens. That's also a possibility. It can. You said University of Ottawa is nearby, which again gives you
five
students an
minutes. Yeah.
opportunity like to stay in a
Well,
place where, yeah.
we kind of look at as we call it it's not always a triangle, but in this case it is. There's kind of the employer triangle. So when it comes to the university, we're thinking this would be great for visiting professors, teaching assistants, graduate students. So it's sort of set up nicely and that's a group that really doesn't have access to the typical student housing in Canada. Student housing is really only for first year students, and so after first year you have to go find your own. So this would be close to campus. The other one is the hospital. So there's a lot of healthcare workers that have to commute long distances after long shifts, and the hospitals have absentee problems. So the idea of bringing your employees closer to work is really desirable. And then I mentioned Parliament Hill, which is where the Canadian government sits. 4,000 people work on that hill, and that's a 10-minute walk away. And a lot of those people are kind of young workers, early career workers who are working for the government. So that's kind of the triangle. But then there's a brand new entertainment venue that's going into that neighborhood that is owned by Live Nation, which is a big media concert and promotion entertainment company. So a lot of vibrancy going in. What that neighborhood needs right now is lots of people who are going to live there and call it their home. So that's what we're setting out to do with this development. And then we have other developments that are in a similar situation. In Toronto, we're looking at another building in Calgary. It seems like every day we get a building, and we're, as I said, with our partners, we're getting very good at assessing buildings for viability for conversion. And Mike, I'll make one other mention, because we've talked lots about conversions, and I said we need to build housing fast, and we need to build housing in 7 years. So we're always open to the opportunity to create new buildings on vacant land, and we're certainly talking to governments across Canada about where that vacant land could be at a lower price to encourage that more affordable housing stock and more flexible housing stock to be built. So for us, it's we call it ourselves a co-living collaborative, because we need to collaborate with developers. We've got a great developer we're working with called Windmill on some projects in Ottawa, for example. And then we have to collaborate with governments, because governments are really trying to solve the housing crisis, and so we want to collaborate. We want to collaborate with the communities that are around the buildings that we're looking at. So it's really important to kind of bring co-living to Canada, and we're obviously very passionate about doing that as fast as we can.
A lot of people would be interested in knowing a little bit of financials, if you are comfortable sharing, I think, in terms of broadly in terms of how if you have to build something like this, what goes into it and how you are approaching it.
Yeah, I mean, right now we're looking at in the language you've taught us, as we're looking at asset heavy models. So we're looking to purchase buildings, renovate those buildings, and operate those buildings. So that's the model. The reason we've started with that is that while we believe there will be lots of owners of office buildings and even owners of land that would be interested in looking at co-living, because it still hasn't shown up in Canada the way it has elsewhere. Doing one with great partners, showing people what it looks like, showing how similar it is in some ways to existing purpose-built rental and student housing stock. So it's not radical. It's just good. That's going to be our priority to get started. So, we're conscious of the investor environment, and that people are more cautious. So we're looking. This will be the secret of how we build the model, but we're looking to focus on internal rate of return in that 15 to 20% range, which is a high rate of return for investors. We're looking to get our development yields up in that 5% range, so that's also a positive. And I think, as importantly, we're also looking to work with, I mentioned that employer triangle. We're looking to work with those employers to help us secure floors in our developments ahead of even the financing round, so that we already know that there's going to be people living in those co-living units from the get-go. So that's something we've really focused on, is if we're going to offer those kinds of returns and affordability, which is the challenge, we need to make sure that we've got a good start on the need in that local area and the interest in co-living broadly. We know what the interest is there amongst young workers. We've done that research across the country. It's absolutely there. We just have to work locally to make sure that the people investing in various buildings can see that need very, very clearly.
I'd like to give a couple of examples, right? Like I've seen few office conversions also, and even new conversions where this was a relatively new concept. Let's say
Mhm.
UK has a development called Beach Grove. There are a couple of developments in Europe where office to co-living conversion happened.
Yeah.
A couple of them in India, one in Australia. Like this is what I know of. I'm 100% sure there are a lot of them going on, but
Yep.
a lot of people who were initially taking bet on such projects were very scared about the demand or whether, see, the returns are directly proportional to the demand, and they were like, okay, you're promising this much, but what about like what if the demand doesn't come, what if you're not able to sell, all of this whole financial
Mhm.
model that you've built will go for a toss. One thing that, like, I know places now that have like a 500 people waiting list, and these were conversions, some
Yep.
from off, like one from office, one from, it was an industrial building, it was not an office but an industrial building, manufacturing unit which was later converted to co-living. The kind of response they saw in terms of the demand was even not believable to the people who were building it themselves. So
Mhm.
the thing is, it's it's also about if you do it in a right way, if you build right kind of community, the communication from the start, setting up the right expectation from the start. If all of this is in place, there is a huge overlap of students, young workers, and even mid-life workers who are staying away from their family and don't want to spend too much, but still want to live in an area which
Yep.
gives them that homely feeling and has accessibility to uh, the amenities as well as people, right? And
Yeah.
what you showed us in terms of design, in terms of what you spoke about, it kind of fits right in the center of that puzzle. So I'm 100% sure that given what the successes that I've seen for such kind of developments in other parts of the world, definitely I don't see anything different from them in terms of what you are doing. So I think it's more about uh, the belief. It's more about being rational. And if you go in the market and ask 10 people that, hey, if something like this comes up, would you like to rent? I'm 100% sure seven of them will say yes. So,
Yeah.
so kudos to
Yeah.
you for this.
Well, and we've used the same stabilization models, which is, for those who all these different terms, but the time it takes us to rent out the entire building, we've used the same model as other purpose-built rental in Canada. But having done a tour into the UK and also in Barcelona over the autumn, we saw, there are now developments that are opening up in the UK that are fully occupied before they open because
Yeah.
as you mentioned, the waiting list. So obviously that's, from an investor standpoint, they'll ask for the ones that didn't get rented up, and that's fair. It's their money, and they should ask for that. And I think for us, the need is there. The vacancy rates in Ottawa and other cities across Canada are still very low. The cost that we're offering is going to be below the market in these areas, below the market of other rental units. So there's a lot of things that we can put forward to the market. And we've also got governments interested in this kind of development. It solves a lot of their problems too. Is if we can create affordable housing that reduces loneliness and helps to a positive impact on the environment, sign us up. That sounds good.
And then one of the bigger examples, even in the North American continent, is Pat Split, right? Although it's not an operator, it's a marketplace, but it shows the kind
Yeah.
of demand that they have been able to generate on a platform by doing. See, they are doing it in a distributed supply manner. You are doing it in a consolidated supply manner. But ultimately, when I see it from a demand perspective, if they are
Mhm.
able to fill it like at a 95, 98% occupancy within the like a 10 bedroom, like I was talking to their management team some time back, like a 10-bedroom apartment gets rented within 30 days, which within 30 days, which, and they just via their platform shows the kind of
Yeah.
need that exists in the market, right? And if that is something that is there which showcases the needs, I don't think there is any problem from a demand perspective. It's more of a supply problem, not a demand problem, is what I've seen in my conversations across the different geographical regions.
Yeah. And we believe you're right. Like that's when we talk to young workers across Canada, they're like, how soon can you open up? Um, they aren't the investors, and that's the reality for a lot of the a lot of the operators that I've talked to as well, is that we need to make sure that the investors are satisfied with this. But it's similar enough to purpose-built rental, but it's just better. That's what I love about talking about it, is that we've had rental housing for in Canada for centuries, and student housing for a century, and they both work. This is right in the middle, and it's takes the best elements of both, and offers the flexibility and the location, and the affordability that is what Canada needs in its housing supply right now.
Perfect. I think we have given enough food for thought to everybody listening in terms of why this is something which can work and should work. And thanks a lot for sharing the real-time designs and examples. If anybody of you listening are interested in investing, partnering, or just knowing about what Robert is building, please reach out to Robert. You can go to Toboggan Flats and directly reach out from the website, or it's
Mhm.
robert@tobogganflats.com. You can reach out to him via email. I will share his credentials in the description. And all the best, Robert, for these
Yeah,
beautiful projects. Rooting for you from this side and looking forward
thanks.
to. I think I would love to have another follow-up conversation probably after a few months to understand where the project is. But I'm 100% sure after listening to this conversation, which is generally much deeper, I think if people have any doubts, that should be cleared out. So thanks a lot for taking our time and speaking to us. And yep,
You have to come over and come tobogganing sometime, Mayank. There's lots of snow here this winter. So, but yeah, thanks so much. And you've been a huge support since early days for Toboggan Flats, and your insight and your passion for co-living has rubbed off on all of us, and we're just grateful to you for all your help. So thank you.
thanks a lot, Robert.